look at that. So we're in Luke. We're continuing in Luke. We've been in Luke. But that's not a bad thing. Jesus says a lot, and there's a lot for us to learn from in Luke. And as disciples, as followers, as people who walk in the footsteps of a master, that being Jesus, it is good for us to do this, and we continue to do so. And so just a little recap on where we are and what's been going on. Jesus has been in a temple, right? He came into Jerusalem, rode on a colt, offering peace to the city, wept over the city because they did not see it or accept it. He goes straight to the temple, flips tables and clears out moneylenders, those who are exploiting those there. And then he is facing a series of questions within the temple, and we kind of jump mid into that. We're going to deal with two of the questions that he was asked, and in this process he has made those that were in power, those that he is disrupting, those that stand to lose power and influence and money from those who are exploiting, the experts in the law, the Pharisees, the rulers of the temple. They don't like being disrupted. And Jesus is becoming more and more and more of a disrupting force. And so they are full on planning to kill him. It's been kind of murmured, but you can see the pressure and the tension within the narrative of this story. It's this true story, but the way it's written, this story, and it's coming to a head. And we know the story, and we know it's coming to a head. And it's building, and they're just ramping up, trying to find any angle in any place. They haven't moved on killing him because the people, they are hanging on his every word, and they are surrounding him, and they know that it won't go well for them if they try to arrest him at this moment. So, the question and answer with Jesus continues. More people are coming to try to trap him, to try to stump the chump, is what we might call it today, to try to cause him to trip up or to look the fool. And Jesus knows his stuff. He's pretty good. Perfect, right? And so we can learn a lot from how he handles these situations and how he deals with these questions, because are there ever situations where people ask loaded questions of you? Or maybe times when people ask a question when they really think they already know the answer and they're just trying to catch you in a wrong answer, or to see how wrong you are, or try to make you look less intelligent, and really they're just trying to show off for themselves. Have you ever seen or been in a circumstance like this? If you haven't, I would like to introduce you to Facebook. This type of stuff happens all the time. If you haven't been on Facebook, please stay away. It is what it is. So, all right, let's continue on. Keeping a close watch on him. This is a statement about those who are trying to kill him. They sent spies, so it's full-on espionage spies, who pretended to be sincere. They hoped to catch Jesus in something he said so that they might hand him over to the power and the authority of the governor. So there's just someone waiting for Jesus to trip up and fail. And they're sent by those who are wanting to exploit it and kill him. So the spies question him. Teacher, we know that you speak and teach what is right, and that you do not show partiality, but teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. This seems like a nice statement, and it is, but they're kind of blowing smoke, right? They're kind of buttering him up. They're trying to get him to let his guard down. Jesus, he knows better. Is it right for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not? This would have been a contentious question, right? A foreign occupying country has subjugated Israel, a nation, and the Roman government would have taken taxes from them. This is why tax collectors were seen as traitors. to the Jewish people, to Israel. They would have been seen as the chief of sinners, and we encountered them many times. And so asking this is a loaded question. It's a bomb. It's not an honest question. And they know that if either way Jesus answers, right? If Jesus answers no, like it's all God's money, just make sure you take care of that. We answer to a higher calling. What happens? He gets drugged before Caesar, right? He gets drugged before the government, because we know one thing: when citizens don't pay their taxes, that's one time the government, responds quickly, right? And if he said, well, pay your taxes, then all the Jewish loyalists would be up in arms. Well, he doesn't, like it's a very divisive issue, right? Can we imagine a world where there might be a divisive issue ever? Yes. We live in one, right? All right, so he saw through their duplicity, right? He saw that they were asking a dishonest question, a question. They really weren't interested in the answer. They did not want to have a long, drawn-out, informed decision where they can submit to what Jesus is saying on the intricacies of tax code and obeying the laws above you and the rulers above you, but also, obeying a higher power of God. Like they didn't really want that. They really just wanted to trip him up. He saw through that, and he said this to them: show me a denarius, right, a coin. Whose image and inscription are on it? And they answered, Caesar's. He said to them, then give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. So this is a brilliant answer that answers and does not answer this question, right? Because if it's Caesar's, isn't it still God's because he owns all things? So this is a Jesus way of saying, you're not smarter than me. You're not going to stump me, but also you're dishonest, and I don't want to play, and we're not playing this game. All right? We're not doing this. I'm not playing this game. Like if you were in, I think if it was an honest, earnest question, there probably would be more here. It is an answer, but it also is a sidestep to the question that was dishonest. They were unable to trap him in what he had said there in public, and astonished by his answer, they became silent, right? Jesus saw through their dishonesty, their duplicity, their double-mindedness, their double talk, right? And he didn't validate them. He silenced them, right? He responded in a way that shut them down and didn't give them a platform to argue and drive the issue farther. He silenced them and moved on, which is something we can learn from. When we have those voices, those people in our lives who are just there to argue, or just there to try to catch you, or just there asking questions to try to appear superior or to call you out, and it's not coming from a place of honesty, not coming from a place of brotherly love, wanting to help edify and lift you up or strengthen the body, don't validate it. Silence it and move on. And I know that's a dangerous thing to say, because we have a potential to become arrogant and think we know the answers and dismiss everyone else. So, truly suss out whether, people and their heart and what they're approaching you with. But Jesus silenced these people and moved on. And if we're following him, it's okay for us to do that also. All right, continuing on. Some of the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to Jesus with a question. Right? So this would have been a sect within this religion, a group that had a subset of belief that did not align with the greater belief that there was a resurrection, that there would be a bodily resurrection at some point of all those who died, and then a new kingdom established. And so some of the Sadducees, this group who did not believe in that miraculous future, which we see Jesus say, and which is core to the Christian belief, who say there is no resurrection, came to Jesus with a question. So this is, I'm going to ruin a group of people that think they already know are asking a question. Teacher, they say, and they paint this elaborate scene trying to stump him. Teacher, they say, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies and leaves a wife but no children, the man must marry the widow and raise up an offspring for his brother. It was part of the culture because keeping a family alive was really important, and keeping land within a lineage was really important. It was part of Jewish heritage and its culture, so they had laws in place to make sure that that happened. And so this is one of those Levitical laws that it makes sense and is there for that reason. So Moses wrote for us, I'm just going to read it one more time, that if a man's brother dies and leaves a wife but no children, the man must marry the widow and raise up an offspring for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers. The first one married a woman and died, childless. The second and the third married her, and in the same way, the 7 died, leaving no children. Finally, the woman died too. All right, so they're creating this situation. So Moses says this. So here's a hypothetical, crazy, extreme situation we want you to ask, right? Where one marries one, then another, and they all die, and they all die, and they all die. What then? All right, have we ever encountered situations where there is a reasonable rule, and then someone takes and pushes it all the way to the extreme to try to disprove it, and then ask you and try to stump you about that? Ever seen anything or any situation where, like, happens? That's kind of a dishonest, it's just a way sometimes people argue that doesn't make sense. What's the likelihood of this happening? Pretty unlikely. So you know that there's some subtext. They're trying to stump Jesus. Now then, at the resurrection, whose wife will she be? Whose wife will she be? Since the 7 were married to her. Right? So if this woman was married to 7 different men, no children, what happens in the resurrection? And so these men, they asked a question. All right? They weren't duplicitous about it, but they probably weren't being fully honest. Like, this is not a reasonable question in many ways. They were in error, for sure, about the resurrection, as we see with Jesus' answer, but it's just interesting how he holds it. So, how he answers it. So, let's watch. So, Jesus replied, "The people of this age marry and are given in marriage." Of this age, meaning of the age that he's talking about. And we marry and are given in marriage now, so we're still part of that age. Okay. But those who are considered worthy of taking part in the age to come and in the resurrection from the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage. So he's talking about a future time when things are fundamentally different enough that marriage doesn't make sense. And they can no longer die, for they are like angels. They are God's children, so direct creations of God, since they are children of the resurrection. Talks about it's a new way of living, a way of existing that doesn't quite make sense to us. The lack of death, the lack of needing to be married, being like angels, direct creations of God with that close relationship is a bit foreign to us. But it shows that we're not there. And Jesus is inviting them into a much bigger picture of what the resurrection will be than what their earthly, limited perspective mindset is. But in the account of the burning bush, even Moses showed that the dead rise, for he calls the Lord the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. So Moses, when he's talking to God, he's referring to these 3 men, and Jesus goes on to say, he is not the God of the dead, but of the living, for to him all are alive. And Jesus is making the point that because he is saying that God is actively the God of those men, and God didn't correct him, and we know that God is not a God of the dead, but of those who are living, that this in Levitical, rabbinical way of thinking is proof. Even though we might not argue this point from our way of thinking, this is a solid Jesus rabbi way to answer and silence the Sadducees. So some of the teachers of the law responded, right? The same teachers of the law that were probably trying to kill him, that weren't happy with what he was doing, they said, well said, teacher. Which also kind of proves even when you don't like someone, when they don't like someone else, it's easy to hop on their bandwagon, right? The enemy of the enemy. All right, anyways. Some of the teachers of the law responded, well said, teacher, and no one dared to ask him any more questions, right? So he kind of silenced them. He showed that he was inviting them into greater and bigger and a larger set of knowledge. And they finally stopped asking questions. They finally were quiet. And Jesus, in that space he created, was able to say this. People stopped asking questions they thought they knew the answer to and started listening, right? Which is something we need to do. All right, this is what he says. Then Jesus said to them, why is it said that the Messiah is the son of David? David himself declares in the book of Psalms, what Joy read earlier, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. David calls him Lord. How then can he be his son? Right? Lineage is a real important thing, honoring your father. No one would have ever thought of calling their son a Lord in the way they thought and the way lineages worked in that culture. But Jesus is pointing out, things are different. What I'm talking about is bigger and redefines everything so much that even David called one of his descendants, which they thought that the coming Messiah, who Jesus is, would be a descendant of David. And that's why the lineage are listed at the beginning of some of the Gospels. It is a proof text of Jesus' lineage from David. And so it's so fundamentally different that David would consider calling one of his offspring Lord because he would become so important. And the entire hierarchy and the way we think of things would be so reestablished in this new kingdom and this new established way of living after the resurrection. Our sonship and our daughtership of God is important, right? I'm just going to say that again. Our sonship, our daughtership of God is important. Owen's not in here, but me and Owen, we went to a basketball game yesterday. He was playing basketball at Hanover. Hanover. And he was wearing shorts, and I was wearing shorts just because unless I have to wear jeans, I hardly ever do, and I don't get cold. And he and I were just talking and walking, and he was like, Dad, why don't our legs get cold? Why are we okay doing this? And I don't know, it's just how we are. But the first thought that popped in my head was, well, let's just blame it on our Scottish heritage. Used to running around the Highlands in kilts and never, well, that was my first thought. And it's just a silly story, but my heritage, which, how long it's been since McClure's? At least my chunk of McClure's have been in Scotland. Aside from a vacation, a long time. And we spent time in Ireland before that. We know from the criminal records there. And it's been a while. But even that thought, has made an impression enough on me to give that as an example to one of my kids. Now, imagine if our childship, our sonship, our daughtership of God was as pressing on me all the time. Where, Dad, why are we doing this? I'm not necessarily about the legs getting cold thing, but why are we taking care of our neighbor? Not just it's the right thing to do, but because this is what our Father taught us to do. This is what our family does. A family under God, with a loving Father, a first eldest brother of Jesus. And this is what our family does. We take care of our neighbors, or we do this. What if, that's what Jesus is inviting us to. And it's so important, and so it reframes our existence so much that our lineage, that David would call his son Lord. So here's the point. We covered a lot. Jesus said a lot. We could have made 30 different points, and I could preach this sermon probably 30 times and 30 different points come out. But this seemed like what we need to lean into this morning. Our lineage is important, right? Who we see our sonship as, who we see our daughtership as, the family traits we inherit and we embody and we try to live into is important. So, here's the question. Who are you a child of? Right? There's an earthly answer. There should be a couple earthly answers, like it takes two, right? So there's an earthly answer, but there's also a heavenly and a bigger picture. And the question that this invites us into is just which one is greater, has a greater influence on us, right? Are you allowing your earthly parentage and the culture you were born into and the environment and the habits that are you letting that totally define you? Or are you being influenced greater by a heavenly Father and by Jesus and the words he says? So I'm going to let that set. Let's take a couple sips of coffee and I'll close this in prayer. Heavenly Father, that's what you are. You're a father. Thank you for adopting us messy, broken, rebellious children that we are, caring about us and comforting us and disciplining us, giving us feedback for when we're not living life right, and guiding us and instructing us through your Son on how life ought to be lived better, how it could be lived better, and inviting us to the life that would bring, both now, but also in eternity after that resurrection that Jesus is talking about. So be with us. Help us to really assess what is weighing on our lives the most. Assess where the habits we have are coming from, the coping mechanisms, the way we deal with our spouses, the way we deal with our children. Is that a habit of you, a family of God, characteristic, or is it something we've picked up along the way that falls short? Help us to be honest. Help us to be humble enough to submit to you in this. And we thank you for your Son, for the work he did on the cross, for the life it gives us now and in eternity. Amen.